My nephew just received his rejection letter from the Ivy, where my dad got his PhD. He had perfect scores on the ACT and across 7 AP exams. He has started academic groups and clubs at his school, and he's a virtuoso pianist. Despite all this, he didn't get in. Why? We know why.
Affirmative action in higher education was basically gutted over the summer by the Supreme Court. And as we always were, black people were used and are still being used as the scapegoat to make white people feel better. The same woman went on to say that people are missing the point. What she said wasn't about her nephew. She's saying that the issue is these known discriminatory admissions offices. The same student intersectionalized would almost certainly be accepted.
Now, there's a lot of funny stuff about this scenario, and don't get me wrong, we will get into it all, but I think the funniest thing may be the fact that affirmative action is no more. You all insisted that unqualified black candidates were taking your place, and if there was no affirmative action, then you'd be able to get into these schools, yada, 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 so and so and so, but you still can't. And you're still alluding to the fact that black people are the problem. Oh, yeah, we know why he didn't get in. My dog diggity. If he'd been intersectionalized, then he would have been fine. But affirmative action isn't even a thing. You all insisted that unqualified blacks were taking your spots, right? And you did your thing to get affirmative action taken out of the books. And now it has, and yet we are still being blamed because a lot of folks don't want to come to terms with the reality. Maybe you're just not that great of an applicant. Before we even get into this post, right? Let me share something with y'all that I recently screenshotted. This was probably screenshot 3 days ago. It was very recent, okay? This is something I stumbled across personally and screenshotted. So I am in these medical school Facebook groups, and people will often post things like, oh, like, would this extracurricular activity look good on my application? Like, oh, yeah, like, I was in the orchestra, whatever. Does that show leadership if I was the first chair? Whatever, right? So this one guy came and posted this, okay? Now, I cannot see the screenshot to read it word for word, but if you cannot, see it because you have vision impairments or something, let me go ahead and tell you what was said, basically, right? So he posted talking about, it's been very cold where I live recently. Would it look good on my medical school application if I bought some stuff for homeless people and gave it to them, then got the director of whatever organization to sign off on it, basically? Y'all. So, mind you, people did flame this guy. He did end up deleting his post, but not before I screenshot. Okay, the devil works hard, but Flower Tower works harder, right? And y'all, this is going to bring us into a good conversation about exactly what is missing from your applications. Not just medical school, but we can apply this to her nephew and his Ivy League application as well. Let's look at her nephew's accomplishments, okay? So he got a perfect score on the ACT. He got perfect scores on 7 AP exams. He's a virtuoso pianist, yada, 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 so and so and so. Okay, he also started some clubs and activities, okay? Can we take a moment to realize that this is really not that remarkable? Because this is my thing. Clearly, her nephew comes from a privileged background, okay? And I'm saying that because she mentioned, oh, he applied to the school that my father got his PhD from. So his granddaddy got a PhD. I don't know about his parents, his auntie, his uncle, whatever. But it's easy to assume that he comes from the sort of family that has high educations and stuff like that, right? Is it really remarkable for somebody from a background like that to be a virtuoso pianist and have a perfect ACT score? It's really not. I'm sorry, because pretty much everybody from that background has those things because their parents have the money to put them into piano classes when they're young. They have the money to put them in ACT prep classes and stuff like that. It's really not that out of the ordinary for him to have those things. Now, I'm not dogging nobody. I'm not a hater. Y'all know I'm a just flower. I attempt to be an unbiased tower. I attempt, right? But this is the reality, though. Yeah, when you come from a privileged background, I would expect you to have a perfect ACT score. I would expect you to have perfect AP scores. I would expect you to be a virtuoso pianist because, again, your parents have the money to put you in these fancy test prep classes, to pay for private piano lessons, etc., etc., etc. I would be side-eyeing you if you were not those things, quite honestly, right? And that's where this discussion of intersectionality comes in, right? It's more impressive for somebody like me from Detroit, who went to Detroit public schools, whose family ain't had no money for private lessons or ACT prep or something, to have gotten the ACT score that I did. Now, I didn't get a perfect score. A perfect score on the ACT is 36, but I did get a 30, which is in the 90-something percentile, right? So I did pretty darn good on the ACT, and I wouldn't call myself a virtuoso violinist, but I taught myself to play the violin, and I did it well enough to play it in college, right? And again, that's where this topic of intersectionality comes from. Yeah, you did better on the ACT than me. But I mean, you had way more resources, way more handouts, so and so and so. And matter of fact, I'll use your favorite little term. I had to pull myself up by my bootstraps. Meanwhile, I didn't even have no shoes. So I'm pulling myself up by non-existent bootstraps. You had a fancy ass pair of combat boots. You need to pull yourself up by shit. So yeah, I would expect you to have those things as opposed to an applicant like myself, okay? Let's not even put the intersectionality aspect into it, though. Let's not even look at that, because I know y'all finna come, you're just an unqualified black applicant. You only got in because you're black. Let's look at this just, grade for grade, test for test. Let's say the admissions person gets both of our applications. He has a higher ACT score than me. He probably has grades that are a little higher than mine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But this is the other point that I am going to make here. Some of you all are really just checking boxes off. You don't really have any depth. You don't really have any nuance. Y'all are sitting up there in these medical school groups talking about, should I donate to the homeless because it'll look good on medical school applications? Are you kidding me? Like, y'all are literally just going through life checking boxes off. You don't have any flavor. You don't have any soul. There's obviously something missing from your application. You think people can't read through you? Like, you think that somebody sits down and interview you for a spot for their school and they can't see through you? That you only chose to donate to the needy because you wanted to check off a box for your application? You think people can't pick up on stuff like that? The reality is, some of you all just ain't got that special sauce. You're literally just a bunch of test scores and GPAs. And that's just not that interesting, especially considering when there's a million other people who have equally competitive test scores and GPAs. And then there's a billion more people who test scores and GPAs might be a little bit lower than yours, but are so much more just well-rounded. You know what I'm saying? Why is this so hard to get? Why is this so hard to get? You just checked off the boxes. Oh, well, I got to get this grade. I got to get this score. I got to play an instrument, checking off boxes, so and so and so. You don't have any hobbies outside of anything related to school or whatever's going to help you get into a school, whatever. You're just not that interesting, boo. You aren't interesting. You aren't remarkable at all. I would expect every rich person from a privileged background where, their parents and grandparents got PhDs and master's degrees and all of this other stuff. I would expect every person from a background like that to have the things that your nephew has. Like, you absolutely should have a perfect ACT score. You absolutely should be a virtuoso pianist. You absolutely should have 7 perfect AP scores. There is no reason why you should have the money and the privilege and the access that you do and you not have those things. Those are bare minimum requirements for somebody from a background like the one that your nephew is from. So you telling me that basically your nephew really didn't do shit. Basically, he really didn't do shit. You a rich kid who's a virtuoso pianist. Congratulations. Just like every other rich kid's parents can put them in piano classes and have them be a virtuoso. Congratulations. So what did you actually do to go above and beyond? Because it's giving absolutely nothing. Next, observe how she said that her nephew was rejected from the school that her father got his PhD from. Why is that important, that your nephew got rejected from the school that your father got his PhD from? Oh, because you think that because your nephew's grandfather got his PhD from there, he should have some preferred admission just based off the fact that he's related to alumni. So you're telling me that you don't give a hoot about affirmative action as long as it's benefiting your mediocre ass nephew. Because again, the shit that he's done, considering his background, is really not going above and beyond at all, right? You don't care about your nephew having preferred admissions based off the fact that his grandfather went to that school. But God forbid a black person be approached with a little bit of understanding. Oh, you came from Detroit public schools. Yeah, maybe you didn't get as good an education as some rich kid from the suburbs. So yeah, maybe your ACT score is going to be a little bit lower. You don't want to see that. But if your little raggedy nephew gets a preferred admissions based on the fact that his granddaddy went there, oh, that's cool though. Can somebody explain to me why legacy admissions are the only affirmative action that is okay? Because when you look at the scores, you break it all down, you'll see that these legacy admits actually usually have lower stats than regular admissions, but they get in just because their parents and their grandparents went there, right? Oh, could it be because, golly gee, my grandparents weren't allowed to go to school? My grandparents were born in 1905 and 1917. Literally, my grandparents, my mother's parents, were born in 1905 and 1917 in South Carolina. Do you think that anybody was like, hey, Negro, come to this school and be a doctor, a lawyer, whatever? Not really. Not really. People who look like me were still receiving rejections from universities based off of looking like me well into the 1960s, well until after my parents were born. Not even just talking about my grandparents. No, my parents were alive and kicking when this stuff was still happening. So yeah, my grandparents and my parents don't have these fancy ass degrees. So you telling me that you deserve preferred admissions based off being a legacy student because your grandparents and parents were not oppressed in the way that mine were? You telling me that, like, what? So you telling me that you deserve preferred admissions to this school because your grandfather got his PhD from there, but I don't deserve preferred admissions to no fucking school, even though my grandfather was fighting off the fucking KKK when he tried to go to school. That's what you telling me. That's the most goofball shit I've ever fucking heard. I wish y'all would just speak like straight up. Just be upfront with what you are saying. Be forthcoming. Just say niggas shouldn't have shit and I should have everything. Because that's what it boils down to. That's what y'all really be trying to say. You be beating around the bush and shit. Just say that, baby. Just say that. Make it clear, because it makes no sense that affirmative action based off race and whatever, so and so and so, was outlawed months ago, but y'all are still blaming black people for the fact that your stupid ass, because you stupid as fuck, I don't care what the test scores say, you dumb as bricks, you still blaming black people for the fact that your dumb ass can't get into a school. That don't even make no sense.